In the summer of 2008, a quiet yet seismic shift occurred in the homes of millions of Japanese families. After more than 80 years of existence, one of the most recognizable logos in history was officially retired. For generations, the name National had been synonymous with the modernization of the Japanese household. It was etched into the light bulbs, the batteries, the washing machines, and, most importantly, the rice cookers that sat at the heart of the dinner table. Then overnight, it vanished. The Matsushita Electric Industrial Company, the parent firm behind the brand, rebranded itself as the Panasonic Corporation. The familiar cursive national script was scrubbed from retail signage, instruction manuals, and the front panels of appliances across the country. What prompted this decision? Was it a product failure? A manufacturing crisis? No. The brand was profitable, beloved, and stable. The decision to erase National was a calculated corporate move to align with a singular global identity. But in the process, a piece of domestic history was disconnected from the people who had built its success. The rice cooker, the machine that defined the brand, was no longer just an appliance. It was a memory container that had suddenly lost its name. But the real story of National is not just about a logo change. It is the story of how a single company shaped the rhythms of family life, and what happens when the industrial machine decides to leave its domestic identity behind. Every week, we reconstruct the stories behind the appliances, factories, engineers, repair shops, and family routines that quietly shaped everyday life. We explore the industrial systems that lived on your kitchen counter. If those forgotten memories of technology and home matter to you, subscribe and join us as we document the life cycles of the brands that built our world. To understand why the National brand inspired such profound loyalty, one must look at the Japanese kitchen in the early 20th century. Before the widespread arrival of electric appliances, cooking rice was a labor-intensive daily ritual. It required constant vigilance. In the era of the kamado, the traditional wood or charcoal-fired stove, the cook had to manage the heat of the fire, the water levels, and the timing, all while balancing other household chores. It was a process that demanded experience and left little room for error. Konosuke Matsushita, the founder of the company that would become a giant, identified this friction early. He wasn't just building electronics, he was building tools for better living. When the company launched the National brand in 1927, the vision was clear: to democratize electricity in the home. The name National was intended to evoke the idea of a product for the entire nation, a tool that every household could trust, afford, and rely upon. However, the early years were not about the rice cooker. They were about building a reputation for durability. By the 1950s, Japan was in the midst of a rapid economic reconstruction. Families were moving into urban centers, apartments were shrinking, and the time available for traditional slow cooking was disappearing. The household needed a solution that would replicate the results of the kamado without the constant manual labor of managing a fire. The company had the engineering capability, the factory capacity in Osaka, and the retail network, but they lacked the one breakthrough product that would make National a household verb. The problem was not just engineering a heater, it was about recreating the art of rice cooking, the perfect balance of water, steam, and heat, resulting in a consistent, fluffy grain. Consumers were waiting. They were skeptical of complex machinery. They wanted simplicity. They wanted the promise that once the switch was turned, the meal would be handled. The stage was set for a technical revolution, one that would transform the kitchen shelf forever. In 1956, Matsushita released the SR-1. It was not the absolute first electric rice cooker ever conceived, but it was the first to achieve mass-market perfection. The engineering solution was elegantly simple, yet brilliantly effective. Inside the casing, engineers utilized a mechanical bimetallic thermostat. When the rice was cooking, the temperature remained at the boiling point of water. But the moment the water was absorbed, the temperature inside the vessel would begin to rise. The bimetallic strip, sensitive to this change in heat, would trigger a mechanical switch, instantly moving the appliance from the cook cycle to the warm cycle. For the Japanese family, this was life-changing. You no longer had to watch the pot. You could put the rice in the cooker before leaving for work or school and return to find perfectly cooked grain. The physical experience of the SR1 was defined by that mechanical click, the sound of the switch hitting the warming phase. It was a sound that became the soundtrack of the dinner hour for millions. The success of the SR1 was not just in the engineering, it was in the distribution. National built an incredible network of neighborhood repair shops. If your cooker stopped working, you didn't throw it away. You took it to the local national dealer, often a small family-run shop, where the owner knew every screw and heating element. This created a cycle of trust. The consumer bought the product served the family for years, and if it broke, the community shop fixed it. This ecosystem made National untouchable. Competitors like Toshiba and Tiger were innovating, but National's advantage was its ubiquity. By the 1970s, the National rice cooker had become the gold standard of the middle-class kitchen. The factory in Osaka was running at full capacity, turning out millions of units, while the brand expanded its range into everything from television sets to light bulbs. But even as the SR1 became an icon, the seeds of a new challenge were forming. The mechanical simplicity that made the SR1 durable was becoming a limitation in a world that wanted more precision. A new era of cooking was on the horizon, one that would require more than just a bimetallic strip. The 1970s and 1980s were the golden years for the National brand. If you walked into a department store in Tokyo or Osaka, the appliance aisle was dominated by the familiar, approachable red and blue logo. The brand was more than just a manufacturer, it was an institution. This was the era of the microcomputer, or MICOM rice cooker. As technology advanced, the factory transitioned from simple heating coils to sophisticated sensors. Engineers started embedding chips into the cookers to monitor not just the temperature, but the timing, the soaking of the rice, and the steaming process. The rice cookers became smart. They could handle different grains, different types of porridge, and even keep rice warm for hours without it drying out or turning yellow. For the families who owned them, the transition was seamless. The National shop owner was still there, but the repairs became less frequent as the products became more robust. The brand had successfully navigated the transition from manual, stovetop cooking to the automated digital age. This was the height of the National identity. It was a time when the kitchen was viewed as a sanctuary of efficiency, and National was the gatekeeper. The brand stood for a promise that your family would be fed, that the technology was reliable, and that the company had your back. The warranty cards, carefully tucked into kitchen drawers, were a testament to this trust. Midway through this period, the stakes for the company were higher than ever. It wasn't just about selling a device anymore. It was about defining the domestic lifestyle of an entire generation. If this company disappeared, it wouldn't just be the loss of a manufacturer. It would be the loss of the primary connection between Japanese households and the technology that sustained them. The National store, the neighborhood repair technician, and the reliability of the daily rice bowl. All of this was tied to the corporate identity of the Matsushita family. But as the brand reached its peak, the global market was shifting. The competition was becoming international, and the name National presented a unique problem. While it was deeply loved in Japan, it meant very little to a consumer in London, New York, or Shanghai. To grow, the company needed a name that could travel. The decline of the National brand did not start with a bankruptcy or a scandal. It started with a marketing report. By the 1990s, the company was operating under two different identities: National for the domestic Japanese market and Panasonic for the international market. This was a massive drain on resources. Every advertisement, every logo on a factory building, and every packaging design had to be duplicated. The first signs of the brand's erosion were subtle. Retailers began to see the Panasonic name appearing on more and more products, slowly encroaching on the shelf space previously reserved exclusively for National. The company's leadership realized that to compete against the rising tide of global conglomerates, they needed a unified brand identity. They needed to stop being two companies in one. This forced a difficult choice: abandon the brand that built the company in Japan, or limit the global growth of the Panasonic brand. The strategy was set in motion in the early 2000s. The company began the slow process of phasing out the National trademark. It was a surgical operation, They didn't dump the name overnight. They started by introducing Panasonic into the product descriptions. They launched joint branding campaigns. They slowly reduced the size of the national logo on new models. For the older generation, this was jarring. They had grown up with national. Their first rice cooker was a national. Their wedding gift was a national. Seeing the logo shrink and then disappear felt like a severance of their domestic history. The repair shops, which had been the backbone of the brand's trust, were the most affected. The national store signs were replaced with Panasonic placards. The local shop owners, who had been the face of the brand for decades, became authorized Panasonic dealers. The manufacturing process was also overhauled. The specialized engineering teams that had perfected the mechanical rice cooker were merged into the broader, digital-focused Panasonic research divisions. The focus shifted from the specific, localized needs of the Japanese household to the standardized needs of a global consumer. By 2008, the transformation was complete. The company changed its name from Matsushita Electric Industrial to Panasonic Corporation. The national brand was officially retired. There was no funeral, no dramatic collapse. It was a corporate transition executed with surgical efficiency. But for the people who had lived with the logo for 80 years, the silence was loud. Today, the national brand lives on mostly in the memories of those who grew up in the 20th century. If you visit a rural Japanese town, you can still occasionally find a faded, hand-painted national sign hanging above a dusty storefront, a relic of a time when the neighborhood repair shop was the heart of the community. In the collector's market, the original SR1 rice cookers are treated with the reverence of fine art. They are cleaned, polished, and sometimes even rewired, serving as a reminder of an era when appliances were built to be repaired rather than replaced. The shift to Panasonic was, from a business perspective, an undeniable success. It allowed the company to survive, compete, and lead in the global electronics market. But that victory came with a cost. It effectively ended the story of a brand that had served as the quiet, reliable partner in millions of Japanese kitchens. What remains today, beyond the logo, is the legacy of trust. The engineering standards, the focus on durability, and the deep understanding of the consumer. These were the values that Matsushita built into the national brand, and they are the values that still inform the products Panasonic makes today. But as you stand in a modern kitchen and look at a sleek digital rice cooker with a glossy finish and a Panasonic label, you might still catch a glimpse of the past. If you listen closely when the cooker finishes its cycle, you might not hear the heavy click of the mechanical switch. The digital chime is different. It is more sophisticated, more efficient, and more global. But in that moment, when the steam rises and the dinner is ready, the ritual remains the same. The brand may have changed its name, but the routine, the promise, and the memory of the meal, those are the things that never really left. See you in the next one.